Let me know, okay? And if you're still watching, click on this video here somewhere on my screen, right here on my screen, to find out how Dame Dash tried to expose Cameron.
But from people on a national scale. How would the police promises of drugs and money? These were women that were already down on their luck, struggling with addiction issues, homelessness, and financial strain of their own, which unfortunately made them easy targets. Specific details on these women's individual lives are limited in recorded history, but they all seem to share backgrounds of hardship, with bodies often discovered in abandoned buildings, partially clothed, or showing signs of post-mortem abuse. Victims' discoveries and their stories often went unnoticed, initially due to societal marginalization, like I said before. Eventually, though, the police would face massive amounts of criticism for their delayed responses to cases involving sex workers and addicts. But at the time, authorities really viewed these women, these victims, as people that had put themselves in these situations, castaways that didn't deserve a lot of their time. Horrible, I know. And the discovery that Andre had been committing necrophilic acts only added to the horror once the public truly became aware of these crimes. Community anecdotes shared by former Englewood residents in documentaries and books about this case served to highlight the fear that women in the neighborhood felt at the time, with many avoiding isolated areas, and talk echoing amongst locals of a strangler preying on the vulnerable. However, this would all change on January 28, 2000. On that day, Andre Crawford was finally arrested when DNA evidence from his 1999 probation blood sample suddenly linked him to 7 different murders. And once Andre was booked and brought into the police station, he began to talk. Eventually, he confessed to 11 different killings and several rapes and assaults. During these interrogations, Andre admitted guilt without any remorse, describing murder as an addiction he wouldn't and couldn't stop. And survivors were then brought in who identified him as their attacker. Remarkably, as discussed before, it later came out that Andre had helped authorities distribute leaflets with suspect composites of himself that resembled him, and he even stated that he had advised locals and authorities on precautions against violent crimes. Eventually, Andre was charged with 11 counts of murder, sexual offenses with aggravating circumstances, and 1 attempted murder. But with all of this came an absolute outrage, not only from locals, but from people on a national scale. How had the police missed all of these clues? Why hadn't they investigated these deaths sooner? How was a serial killer able to operate in such a small area for such a long time without being caught? The arrest itself exposed investigative overlaps and errors from within the police department, with Andre's personal involvement in surveillance activities highlighting his audacity. Specifically, after his arrest, locals learned that in the midst of his murder spree, Andre had joined up with locals for something called Operation Safe Passage, a neighborhood watch program organized by police and local leaders, where community members from Englewood, including local men, kept watch over high-risk areas in the neighborhood to monitor for suspicious activity in an effort to enhance safety amidst the ongoing murders. His involvement in this operation allowed Andre to hide in plain sight, as he publicly applauded police updates during community meetings and helped distribute those flyers seeking information on the murders. Authorities who had worked the case, who had specifically hired on Andre to help out with the investigation, which was looking for him, noted that Andre's familiarity with the area, stemming from his transient lifestyle where many bodies were found, made him seem like a helpful local rather than a suspect. To the police, they never would have suspected that this friendly homeless man who wanted to help them was the killer they had been looking for all along. However, Andre wasn't just helping out with the efforts just to help out. It was later learned that he had actually used his participation in these programs and his work with the local authorities to help himself stay informed on police progress in the investigation, and to find out who and what the authorities were looking into, while at the same time continuing the murders. This allowed him to escape justice for years. I mean, just imagine that, people. The serial killer is actually showing up and helping the authorities look for himself. The serial killer is out there handing out leaflets, warning people about the serial killer in the neighborhood, which was once again himself. It's absolutely such a wild story, and it's crazy that the authorities never caught on to Andre. I mean, the answer to their question was literally standing in front of them with a smile on his face and his arms outstretched. It's completely infuriating. However, eventually, as stated before, he was caught, and soon enough he would face justice. And Andre's confessions were nothing short of disturbing. One of the most horrific acts committed by Andre that he confessed to was the murder of Patricia Dunn on or around September 23, 1993, in an abandoned factory on Chicago's South Side. On that day, Andre lured Patricia, who was involved in sex work and drug use, under the pretense of exchanging drugs that he had for sex. However, after getting her alone in the abandoned building, Andre brutally beat Patricia to death, inflicting severe facial trauma that left her face battered and swollen, with defensive wounds later found indicating that she fought back desperately in hope that she would escape. Her body was later discovered naked from the waist down on a loading dock. She had been sexually assaulted, her shoes had been stolen, and a cloth had been deliberately placed over her mutilated face to cover the gruesome injuries. Andre later confessed to having sex with her corpse before leaving it, engaging in necrophilia as a part of his pattern of victim dehumanization. Another disturbing confession from Andre detailed his savage killing of Angela Chatine in the spring of 1995 in an abandoned house just a few blocks from Patricia Dunn's crime scene in Englewood. Angela, who was pregnant at the time of her death and struggled with addiction, was lured similarly by Andre back to the abandoned building with the promise of drugs. Once he got her alone, Andre raped Angela, then battered her face relentlessly until it was covered in bruises and lacerations. Then, to finish the job, he wrapped a cord tightly around her neck to strangle her, until she eventually died and went limp. Her body was once again found nude below the waist, with clear signs of sexual assault, including semen evidence. Her shoes had once again been removed and were missing, and her face, which had been covered in injuries, had been covered by Andre again after the murder with some sort of a cloth in order to hide the horrors. Disturbingly, once again, Andre confessed that after the murder, after he had left the scene, he had later returned to have sex with Angela's decomposing corpse, further desecrating her remains. Among Andre's most chilling confessions was a confession to the murder of a woman named Rhonda King, which occurred in an abandoned site in Englewood. Once again, Andre had lured Rhonda to the abandoned building under false pretenses, and once she was inside the structure, it was already too late. Rhonda was stabbed repeatedly with a knife. The blade plunged deep into her back and left embedded there, piercing her vital organs and causing intense hemorrhaging. Due to the advanced state of decomposition that Rhonda's body was discovered in, animals had scavenged parts, potentially removing the knife, which left her partially skeletonized and unfortunately covered with maggot activity. Andre had strangled Rhonda as well to finish the job, combining his methods of killing and torture in order to inflict prolonged suffering upon his victim. He had also raped Rhonda and engaged in necrophilia with her dead body afterwards. This killing was initially misattributed to another serial killer from the area, Hubert Geralds, who we will talk about in a second, but Andre's detailed confession corrected this. Obviously, this was all shocking and disturbing news in Englewood when this came out. This man had been luring women into decrepit, abandoned buildings, torturing and killing them, and then having sex with their bodies for years, all right there in their own backyard. And their suspect had even gotten involved with the local community and their efforts to bring him to justice. It was disturbing to say the least, but at least he had finally been arrested. Even though he was arrested in 2000, Andre's trial was delayed until mid-November 2009, almost 10 years later, due to judicial errors and related convictions, a moratorium on the death penalty in Illinois, and numerous motions from both sides, resulting in him spending 9 years and 10 months in Cook County Jail, longer than any other inmate in Illinois history. However, on December 10, 2009, a jury found him guilty on all counts and sentenced him to life imprisonment without parole, sparing him penalty partly due to evidence that was presented that Andre had an abusive childhood and struggled himself with addiction.
A serial killer convicted of rape and murdering 11 women in Chicago could have been sentenced to death. A jury recommended that Andre Crawford spend the rest of his life in prison. As John Garcia reports, some relatives of the victims say justice was not served today.
Shortly after hearing the verdict, family members of the 11 victims held hands and prayed outside the courtroom. Most say they had hoped to see Andre Crawford headed for death row. Life in prison is not the justice they were looking for.
I wanted him dead.
Most of the 12-person jury apparently felt the same way. Denise Travers listened to testimony for 6 weeks. She says 10 jurors voted for the death penalty, but 2 held out.
The past 6 weeks have been in vain because he didn't get what he deserved.
Andre Crawford and murdered 11 women, luring them to abandoned buildings with the promise of drugs. A 12th victim survived by playing dead until he left. Claudia Robinson says she is still haunted by Crawford.
He was a killer. He was a monster. And the system gonna let a monster live better than me today. I cannot work. I had nightmares.
State's Attorney Anita Alvarez issued a statement saying, certainly believe that the terror and horror inflicted by this defendant on the multiple victims that he sexually assaulted and murdered was worthy of a death sentence. Crawford's attorneys, however, argued in court that he was abandoned as a baby and sexually abused through his teenage years.
I don't know what he wanted. He never told me. He appeared to be a happy man after it was over, though. In what way? Smack?
Andre was then incarcerated at the Menard Correctional Center until he finally died from liver cancer on March 18, 2017, just 2 days before his 55th birthday. And this served as the closing on one of Chicago's darkest serial killing chapters. We actually visited a location or two in Englewood where multiple victims of Andre Crawford's were found. Just take a look. This was our first stop in the still dangerous serial killer's playground. I guess if we go up here, on the corner up there, there would have been another body found. And then literally right here in this grassy lot, it was the body of 44-year-old Cheryl Johnson that was discovered April 20th, 1999. I mean, that's pretty crazy that just looking at the map, that goes to show how confident a guy like this was and how methodical and how they have these patterns in areas that they like to stick to. And yet for years, like a decade almost, he was able to get away with his crimes and no one put two and two together that this body was related to that body, which was related to this body. But we're gonna do a little spirit box here. You wanna step over here? So we're gonna make this relatively quick because I also don't like just standing out on the street in the most dangerous neighborhood in Chicago. If there's anybody here, any spiritual energy, anybody who might be in this area who can hear my voice or see us, we just want to talk to you and have a conversation. Is there somebody here? On the run. From New York? If there is someone here, can you tell us your name, please? We want to know if whoever's here found peace or if you moved on. I'm especially curious if the conviction of the man who admitted to killing you, if that helped you move on. Did it? Evil? Or maybe if you aren't, I mean, if this is just someone else in the area, did that spirit move on when Andre Crawford was convicted? So many voices, and it's kind of loud around here. It's hard to hear.
Did anybody here see what happened to that woman? No.
I swear I heard Southside Killer.
Is there anybody here that needs our help?
They found me. Can we just confirm, whoever's around here, that they got the right guy for all of these murders? Were you happy when he passed away? Do you remember the names of any of the women who were found in this area? Yes, sir. Thought I heard Bailey.
Do you know how they were killed?
On a bed. Lay down. So Andre Crawford, he's actually dead. Chicago police right there. Interesting. If he's an evil motherfucker, he might come back to the crime scenes.
Is there anyone in this area?
Got the message almost. Are there, I mean, if you're an energy or a spirit around here and you see things that go on in these neighborhoods, is there a serial killer that potentially could be active in this area nowadays? Is that true? There is one or two?
That is.
Does the spirit of Andre Crawford visit crime scenes like this? Does he ever come back to admire his work? Because I'm assuming he wasn't allowed to cross to the other side like all of the rest of us. Where it happened?
Yeah.
You guys got anything else?
I don't think so.
Any last message? Evil. He's dead or something.
Wow. Kind of sound like my neighborhood.
Well, to whoever's here, I'm more spiritual than religious, but I want to leave you some good words and energy. We're all here sending love, light, and healing energy to you, to this neighborhood, to this area. I know you don't need it, but we want to offer it. So if you see a light or you see a pathway somewhere, please take it and take our energy that we're giving you and use it to cross. Heard a lot of weird sexual words, and he would have sex with the bodies after they were dead. He was just a necrophile.
Oh.
So, yeah, I mean, So there was a body found right there. There's a body found here. I don't know if the building's gone. And then literally there was a body found like right down here. So it's actually kind of insane to think that that's all right here.
He was very confident.
I mean, it's pretty crazy actually, leaving one body like, literally this is probably like, what, 200 feet or so from the last one. Just driving down the street right now, we're heading to another location just to pass by where he dumped another body, the first victim of his. It's only a 5-minute drive from that first area. And between the two, all the bodies were found. So all throughout this part of Englewood. And I think you brought up a good question, Mary, that it makes you wonder if there are any active serial killers. Something that's really interesting that I've read a lot about online in the Chicago scene, like hip-hop music, and how a number of those individuals could definitely be considered serial killers. They just use guns instead of strangling or knives. For example, there's King Von. What the f*** are these? Do you see this shit?
Shipping containers.
Dude, that is so bizarre. In the middle of a neighborhood? That is freaky. I mean, just look at that. I don't think I've ever seen something like that in a neighborhood. Look at all of them over there. Dude, take a left and go down here. Dude. I mean,
the whole city of shipping containers.
I've literally never seen something like this. I mean, that's actually like just, dude, that's nuts. What the hell is this? It's literally an entire, they're like apartment complexes of shipping containers in this area. I mean, we're like sealed in here. I don't know if you can see it through the window, but we're like sealed in by these shipping containers. I mean, and this is just in the middle of this neighborhood. And then look at houses right here. I mean, like, people, I don't even think you can really gather how like tall that is on camera, but it's like you're walled in. It's interesting with like a character like King Von, who, you know, there are targeted killings in the kind of Chicago drill scene, like maybe gang related murders or drug related crimes. Someone with someone and they want to get revenge, but King Von actually just enjoyed killing, and he killed like a younger girl and murdered like a number of people. So I don't know, and I don't think he's from this area. I don't know like where O Block is, but it's interesting how crimes and stuff just evolve over time and become different in their own ways. But this area is like just plastered with death. So September 21st, 1993, that is a very kind of dark date in the history of Englewood, because that was the date that marked the discovery of Andre Crawford's first victim's body. September 21st of that year, it was 32-year-old Patricia Dunn whose corpse was found in an abandoned property. Now, I don't know what this property is going to look like nowadays. Very ironic right here. No dumping. 500 feet from where a body was dumped. I wonder if there's going to be a house or something here. Yeah, so 700 West 50th Street, right there. That was the beginning of Andre Crawford's crime spree right here. And I know they don't erect, memorials to serial killers and stuff, but it's always just strange to think, I'm looking at this house, but you'd never be able to tell that this house was used for such nefarious purpose. But Andre Crawford wasn't the only serial killer operating in Englewood. All murder shortly afterwards all throughout the neighborhood, and no one knew missing left time. 3 different serial killers. But Andre Crawford wasn't the only serial killer operating in Englewood in the 1990s. In fact, there were at least 3 different serial killers all murdering with the same modus operandi at the same time in the same small neighborhood in the same city. You see, women were going missing left and right and were turning up dead shortly afterwards all throughout the neighborhood, and no one knew who was committing the murders. Was it a lone wolf killer? A group of serial killers? Individual disconnected incidents? When the truth finally emerged, people were shocked, as it was much darker than they could have imagined. You see, at the same time that Andre Crawford was luring, assaulting, and killing women in Englewood, a man named Hubert Geralds Jr. was doing the exact same thing. Serial killer number 2, Hubert Geralds Jr. Hubert Geralds Jr., born on November 13, 1964 in the US, endured a traumatic childhood marked by abandonment by his father, Hubert Geralds Sr., and severe abuse from his mother's boyfriend, which included mental, physical, and sexual mistreatment. Little is known about his early years, but prior to his crimes, Hubert spent time in New York, where he was incarcerated and paroled on June 19, 1992 on drug charges. And after he was released from prison, Hubert moved to none other than Englewood, where he would embark down the darkest path imaginable. While living in Chicago, Hubert was convicted of residential burglary in 1993 and served a prison sentence until he was released on October 29, 1994. By age 30, Hubert was deeply addicted to crack cocaine and frequently engaged with prostitutes, exploiting their vulnerabilities in the Englewood neighborhood's The Stroll area on South Halsted Street, a haven for prostitution and crime at the time. His killing spree began in late 1994, and just like Andre Crawford, Hubert began targeting drug-addicted female sex workers, whom he lured in with promises of drugs and money. Hubert, unlike Andre, was actually thought to be a familiar face to some of these women, as he had allegedly already employed them for their services in the past. So to them, Hubert was someone that they thought they could trust. But sadly, they were dead wrong. Experts during Hubert's later trial testified that he suffered from something called paraphilia, a mental disorder which gave him uncontrollable compulsions and desires for sexual interactions with unconscious or dead women, compounded by a low IQ, which ranged anywhere from 59 to 73, which classified him as mildly mentally disabled, with brain damage. This psychological profile fueled his dark crimes, where he viewed victims as disposable amid drug-fueled disputes, leading to a series of brutal strangulations over a period of 6 months that absolutely terrorized Englewood's marginalized community. Geralds' MO was chillingly consistent and opportunistic, and he preyed on vulnerable women in high-crime areas of Chicago's South Side, particularly in and around abandoned buildings and alleys in the neighborhood of Englewood. He had a routine. He would seduce his victims with offers of free crack cocaine, and then bring them back to isolated private spots like abandoned houses or vacant apartments, where he would then initiate sexual encounters and eventually turn incredibly violent. Employing a technique dubbed the guardian angel chokehold, Hubert strangled his victims manually by covering their noses and pressing his thumb firmly on their throats, suffocating them without leaving typical ligature marks or external bruising. Some of the deaths to initially appear non-suspicious. He was good at killing, and by killing in this manner, he was able to avoid capture for a prolonged period of time. Later on during his trial, prosecutors described Hubert as being capable of, quote, squeezing the last bit of life, end quote, from his victims, often raping them while they were unconscious, or even by raping their corpses post-mortem, in acts of necrophilia driven by his paraphilic disorder. Hubert discarded the bodies of his victims callously and without care in trash cans, left them in abandoned structures like Andre Crawford, or in waste bins, and left them to decompose amidst filth and vermin. This also helped him get away with his crimes for a longer period of time, as the advanced putrefaction and state of decomposition that these bodies were found in made their autopsies difficult. Some remains were found swarmed with bugs and maggots, emitting foul odors and partially skeletonized due to exposure. The cause of death in all confirmed cases was asphyxia by strangulation, and according to records, no defensive wounds were found on the bodies of the deceased, indicating that before their deaths, the victims were already in weakened states from drug use, which assumedly only served to amplify the horror of their final moments spent gasping for air as Hubert, a seemingly nice guy, suddenly flipped a switch, overpowered and murdered them. Hubert's victims were once again all black women aged 23 to 42 struggling with addiction and sex work, and suffered agonizing ends, as detailed in police reports and confessions. Dorothy Winters, 37, was found on December 22, 1994, strangled and discarded in an abandoned location, her body showing signs of post-strangulation, with her throat compressed until her windpipe collapsed. The body of 23-year-old Alonda Tart was discovered just a few months later on March 14, 1995, in a vacant building. She had been lured back to that location with drugs while she was dying and left in an abandoned building where decomposition had set in, causing her remains to become virtually unidentifiable. Joyce Wilson, 28, found that same month on March 26, 1995, had endured death by suffocation, her body violated necrophilically before being dumped like trash. At around this time, though, Hubert made a mistake. On the night of April 14, 1995, Hubert and a woman he knew named Clenshaw Hopes had been smoking crack cocaine and marijuana together at her apartment in the 5700 block of South Elizabeth Street, inside the Englewood neighborhood. Later on, Clenshaw stated that she and Hubert had left the apartment to go get more drugs and to find money so that they could pay for the drugs. They had both parted ways and split up, and at this point were each alone when all of a sudden she was grabbed by the neck from behind. She later on told the court, quote, "I was being lifted off the ground and started to black out," end quote. Clenshaw at the time was being attacked by Hubert. She was attacked in an alleyway near Racine Avenue, and shortly afterwards she passed out. Later, when she woke up from the strangulation attempt, she was being raped by Hubert inside of a van. Quickly coming to her senses, she fought him off and dove through a piece of wood that was covering an opening, and managed to crawl her way out. Clenshaw later stated that she remembered running like hell and made it back to her home, where she immediately contacted police. But the police did absolutely nothing. Even though at this point a victim had escaped Hubert and gone to the police with their alarming story of rape and strangulation, he was never arrested. Nothing was done. He wasn't arrested or investigated, and he was allowed to continue on with his murderous rampage. Keep in mind, this event occurred in the middle of his killing spree, meaning that if the police would have stepped in and connected the dots at this point, many more lives could have been saved. But they just didn't do it. A few months later, Millicent Peanut Jones, 25, was killed on June 12, 1995, strangled in an abandoned area after a crack smoking session, and her corpse afterwards left to rot in an alleyway. Mary Blackman, 42, was found once again that same month on June 17th in a trash bin near Hubert Gerald Jr.'s family home on South May Street in Englewood. Relatives who had spent time at the house actually reported a disgusting smell emanating from the area, but they couldn't track down where it was coming from. Eventually, though, a discovery was made that would change the course of Hubert's life forever. Hubert was finally arrested on June 18th in Englewood, following a series of events triggered by the discovery of his final victim's body the previous day. The key turning point came on June 17, 1995, when Gerald's sister, Angela Geralds, found the decomposed body of her close friend and housemate, Mary Blackman, stuffed into a trash bin behind their shared family home on South May Street. Angela was horrified. She had just stumbled upon the dead body of her close friend and housemate. However, immediately, she thought she knew who could have been responsible for this. None other than her own brother. You see, Angela knew that Hubert had a history of violent behavior, drug abuse, and prior interactions with local sex workers and addicts. And so, fearing the worst, she immediately contacted the Chicago Police Department to report the body and express her concerns about her brother. Angela's tip provided the direct link that prompted swift police action in an area already plagued by unsolved strangulations of vulnerable women. The police response itself was expedited because investigators, including Sergeant Jack Ridges and Chief of Detectives Michael J. Malone, immediately recognized Hubert's name from that earlier incident report that was made in April of that same year. You know, the report that Clenshaw Hopes had made, where she claimed that Hubert had raped her and attempted to strangle her to death, that the police had never acted on. And something else disturbing came to light after Hubert was arrested as well. It turned out, and you won't believe this, that Hubert himself had contacted the Chicago police in March of 1995 to report the discovery of the body of Joyce Wilson, a 28-year-old prostitute and drug addict who was one of his victims during his serial killing spree in Englewood. That's right, Hubert had actually called the police on himself and had led the police to the body of a woman that he had killed. And they didn't question him at all beyond the formalities about this discovery. On that day in March of 1995, when Hubert called into the police, he actually met up with the officers and led them directly to Joyce Wilson's body, which was found on March 26, 1995, in the back of a parked delivery truck in a vacant lot at 5544 South Racine Avenue near the Englewood neighborhood. Joyce, like all the other victims, had been strangled. At the time, the responding police officers questioned Hubert directly, but released him almost immediately afterwards due to a lack of evidence linking him directly to the crime. And no, even after this, he was never considered to be a suspect. This incident occurred amidst a wave of similar murders in Englewood, where Wilson's death was the fourth in a series that Hubert would later confess to, though authorities initially downplayed the possibility of a serial killer to avoid community panic. And keep in mind, let's think of the timeline here. Hubert called the police on himself to report having found the body of a victim of strangulation murder. Then a month later, a woman filed a police report claiming that Hubert had raped her and attempted to strangle her. They had it right there. The same guy who reported finding the dead body of a woman who had been strangled. There's a report generated about that guy saying that he tried to strangle and kill a woman. And the police did nothing. They didn't connect the dots. They didn't investigate Hubert as a major suspect. They did literally nothing. And all the while, women's strangled bodies kept appearing all throughout the neighborhood. So obviously, after Hubert's own sister turned him into the police and all of this information came out, the public was shocked. Now the police began doing their job. You see, this prior contact that Hubert had with the police, combined with Angela's report and the pattern of murders in Englewood, raised immediate red flags, and shortly afterwards, Hubert was located and taken into custody without resistance. The arrest occurred amid a backdrop of community fear, as the police had been investigating a string of 6 similar killings since December 1994, but had downplayed the serial killer angle to avoid raising a panic. Following his arrest, over a period of several days at a Chicago police station, during which he confessed to the murders of 6 women: Rhonda King, age 18, Dorothy Withers, age 37, Alonda Tart, age 23, Joyce Wilson, Millicent Peanut Jones, age 25, and Mary Blackman, the final victim. He provided to the police specific details about the crime scenes, motives, often disputes over drugs during sexual encounters, and his method of strangulation, which helped them corroborate the evidence. However, in February 2000, DNA evidence and a confession from another serial killer, Andre Crawford, led to Hubert Geralds Jr.'s exoneration for the murder of Rhonda King, who he had falsely confessed to killing. I mean, it's just absolutely insane when you think about the fact that a killer was actually falsely confessing to the murder of a victim of another serial killer who had been operating with the exact same MO at the same time in the same area. That's how dark and violent this neighborhood was during this period. Eventually, Hubert was charged with 6 murders and 1 attempted murder, which led to his trial and death sentence in 1998, which was later commuted to life imprisonment in 2003. We actually visited locations linked to Hubert's crimes while we explored Englewood. Take a look.
So as you can see, I don't know if you'll be able to see this, from that last pin where Andre Crawford's first victim was discovered, her body, we're only 1.1 miles away, 4-minute drive away from the family home of another Chicago, Englewood specifically, serial killer who was active in the exact same years as Andre Crawford. This time the man's name was Hubert Geralds Jr. He was targeting women with the same kind of profile: sex workers, drug addicts, people who society, according to many, kind of tossed to the side. But I mean, I can't imagine how unsafe you must have felt to be a woman around here in this area in the 1990s.